While connected technology is essential for unlocking new efficiencies on the production floor, it's also presented hackers with new opportunities to steal valuable IP and data. To support OT professionals in their battle with cyber criminals, we launched the Security Breach podcast. In each of our over 100 episodes, we've brought in cybersecurity specialists to provide valuable insights and break down critical topics. As a go-to podcast for our listeners, we want to help you align your brand with our expertise. By sponsoring our podcast, your brand will build trust, and your message will stand out to an audience searching for tools to assist their cybersecurity efforts. Secure your share in this rapidly growing segment by sponsoring Security Breach. Contact us today to learn more. Hi, I'm Jeff Franke, Editorial Director of Manufacturing.net and Manufacturing Business Technology. Welcome to Security Breach. Although discussing the military activities currently taking place in Iran runs the risk of bringing up polarizing political views, the cybersecurity realities simply can't be ignored, and they absolutely have to be discussed. One of these realities is that Iran has a legacy of supporting organizations involved with cyber attacks on networks, infrastructure, and companies in Israel and the United States. Companies that utilize industrial control systems. Companies like yours. In light of current events, there is absolutely no question that these groups will escalate their efforts. Although the bombs are falling thousands of miles beyond U.S. borders, know that U.S. manufacturing is a primary target. Historically, many of these groups carrying out these types of cyber attacks were hacktivists or outliers, operating independent of any government or country. They followed their own agenda in realizing personal or political goals. However, as highlighted by the war in Ukraine, these groups have begun to pick sides. They're embracing financial support from nation states and successfully executing attacks meant to shut down, steal data, extort money, and or disrupt critical production or infrastructure operations, regardless of size, sector, or location. Thankfully, there are guys like our guest for today's episode. JP Castellanos is the Director of Threat Intelligence at Binary Defense. He's here to offer some perspective on the evolving hacktivist community, what recent events could mean for industrial cybersecurity, and how manufacturers can prepare and respond to an inevitable uptick in attacks. JP, thanks for the time, and welcome to Security Breach. One of the terms that I think has changed or evolved a little bit over time is what we refer to as a hacktivist. Okay, I mean, they kind of started out as a very altruistic, dynamic. That's shifted a little bit in recent months even. Maybe you can lead us through a little bit of how you define these hacktivists, what are some of their new affiliations, and what kind of threats are they now posing to the landscape?
I would say hacktivism has evolved. In my early days as a cyber threat intelligence analyst, hacktivism was seen as like highly controversial. Think of like Anonymous, right? That's kind of like the first like major hacktivist collective that was out there. So those were the early days of Anonymous, where you had Intel officer Chelsea Manning, who was arrested after leaking documents to WikiLeaks to protest the war in Iraq. And then you had critics that argue he was simply doing cyber vigilantism, right? That caused collateral damage to innocent people and then undermined the rule of law. And now hacktivists are seen more. They're seen more like a threat, I would say. They're seen more like an extension of a threat actor. That's what I've been seeing lately, particularly when it involves geopolitics. You're still going to have hacktivists that are going to be, believing in a certain ideology. If their ideology aligns with their goals that are stating. But now you have countries like Russia and Iran, particularly now, that are employing hacktivists as kind of like a force multiplier, because those align with like national strategic policies. And that's something I've been seeing since the war with Ukraine. I started seeing a lot of hacktivist groups pop up from Russia. One particular that I follow is called No Name 57 parentheses 16, that they specifically target Ukraine and NATO. And then you have another organization like known as Cyber Tufan, which is from Iran, that targets specifically Israel and its allies. So it can be all three, honestly. You can have someone that has good intentions, that believes in has a political ideology or belief for greater good or for a cause. But then you have also that are just politically aligned based on their geopolitics or their nationality. So it's just changed now. And hacktivists, I will say, Still not as sophisticated as your run-of-the-mill like ransomware actors and even like your nation state threat actors, but they still pose a threat, especially to small businesses and organizations that maybe don't have a robust cybersecurity architecture or have a really good secure architecture for their organization. They can be impacted pretty badly by groups like that.
Yeah. I think one of the first groups that really got on our radar screen in the industrial sector was the Cyber Avengers group out of Iran. They started going after a lot of things in Israel from a water treatment perspective. That bled into a lot of industrial control systems that started affecting real important stuff like breweries here in the US. You start messing with our beer supply, we get real aware and real frustrated. But maybe you could talk a little bit about how these folks are now, they're targeting manufacturing. Why is manufacturing on their radar, and why is it staying on their radar, I guess is the bigger question.
Well, the reason being is I would say it's because manufacturing companies have some very valuable intellectual property designs, right? The manufacturing process, R&D, trade secrets. You just mentioned a brewery, right? What if this brewery is making some new IPA? Because I enjoy my beers. They're making some new funky IPA that it's gonna blow up the market and whatnot, and you get an adversary that goes in there and impacts that brewery. That could cause money losses of money to them. But in the case of hacktivism, I think, which leads more to a disruptive side, manufacturing operations are highly, highly time sensitive, right? Any disruption you have is going to lead to significant financial losses, right? Like I said, and it's also an attractive target. That's why you get a lot of not just the hacktivists, but you get a lot of the ransomware guys that are going in there because manufacturing also has, complex and very vulnerable supply chains. So, this also involves, large goal and also involves big global supply chains as well. So these can be seen for a lot of threat actors as initial footholds to reach bigger targets when you were talking about targeted supply chain. Also, with the IT and OT convergence, that's been an attractive target for hacktivists as well, because as this convergence we see expands, the attack surface that allows a breach of corporate IT networks can cascade into those industrial control systems. So legacy and operational technology also systems also often lack some modern security controls, and those are very difficult to patch as well. So it's a combination of all those things. But manufacturing is just a very lucrative target because as someone that before I worked at Binary, I used to work for an oil and gas company here in Houston, Texas. And like downtime was like not even you wouldn't even want to consider downtime. Downtime is loss of money. So that's a big reason. That's one of the reasons why it's such a lucrative target, and also those legacy systems as well.
Sure. So, in looking to defend specifically against these types of attackers, do they have certain tactics they use? Are there certain calling cards they leave? Is there certain things that we can do specifically to ward off some of these attacks?
I mean, normally with the hacktivist, calling cards are usually like denial of service attacks or DDoS, which are more symbolic in nature. And then you got your website differences that, we're seeing that is kind of like it's a direct interference to both the IT and the OT environments. But you do have certain groups like there's one called the Infrastructure Destruction Squad or IDS. They're formerly known as a group known as Dark Engine, and this is a pro-Russian group that almost focuses exclusively on physical sabotage of industrial control systems. They've targeted facilities in the United States and Europe, often promoting like specialized industrial malware, like one called Volt Raptor, which is designed to paralyze the processes in those industrial control systems. And then when you look at another one called Handala Hack, which is a big Iranian is a pro-Iranian group. Right now, currently, they've made some claims online of compromising various systems out there, but we're still waiting to see if those claims are validated. One thing I will say that is already in open source reporting, the Handala Hack Group in particular, they are a hacktivist group, and I air quote hacktivist because part of their team are hacktivists, but they take orders from the Iranian government, particularly the Ministry of Intelligence and Security, or the MOIS. And I found out the day before yesterday, one of the main directors of Handala Hack was killed in an airstrike. So right now they're kind of like in flux because you could say like they're the commanders or the guys who are giving them orders to the other guys are taken out. So the Handala Hack guys right now are just going online and just making all these wild claims. But normally Normally that's an example of one, but going back to the calling cards and everything like that, for that group, for Handala Hack, they do their tactics involve with like network intrusions and then destructive actions such as like deployment of their own custom malware, which is a wiper malware, and it was intended to permanently damage systems, and then exfiltrate proprietary designs. So you can interpret that as a calling card for these actors, posting screenshots and videos of systems being targeted, normally on their Telegram sites. Almost all of these hacktivist actors have a Telegram site where anyone that's interested wants to go in there, maybe wants to join the team, or just for them to just promote, like, oh look, we hit this site in Israel, we hit this site with this water treatment plant in Kansas, we hit this other facility in Cyprus. That's something that they do. They do this usually a way to flex their skills to the other guys with the intent of, like I said, possible recruitment into their ranks. So I would say things since 2024 have changed from what hacktivists are doing in the past when it comes to these when it comes to calling cards that they're deploying.
Well, I think one of the things that makes this group more frightening or more concerning is the fact that their motives or what they're looking to achieve really is chaos. Yes, they will ransom a group or a company, but really it feels like it's less about the money and more about the disruption and whatever else they can do to sort of shut things down for a given period of time. As a result, their tactics are less, hey, we hacked you, we're good, we don't want to do anything more, just pay us the ransom. These guys are more like, we wrecked your stuff, you can pay us or we're going to continue wrecking stuff. There's not that sort of level of customer service or professionalism that we've seen with other hacking groups, as silly as that sounds.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong on that because it's very interesting in the I would say the red space or adversary space of the dark web and like financials and whatnot. The ransomware threat actors do act kind of like a professional service, right? If you're
Yeah.
compromised by a ransomware actor, they're gonna go and they'll be like, hey, you're literally chatting with customer service. It almost seems from
Yeah.
what I've heard and what I've seen, it's literally talking to customer service to get you to pay the ransom,
Yeah.
give them the key, they'll give you the key, and they'll even tell you. I've seen and heard some ransomware actors actually provide like mitigations, like this is what you should
Yeah.
do to prevent that from
Yeah.
happening to you. You're absolutely right. And again, the hacktivists, I think it's just more of a, I don't want to say a skill-based issue because I think some hacktivists are actually do have some skill and some don't. But it is more of a just smash and grab destruction kind of thing because they're following an ideology. They're not looking for they're not in it for the money. They're just in it for the lulls, as like they used to say back in the past, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I bring that up because I think there's still this notion in manufacturing of we're going to get hit. Let's just pay the ransom. We'll send it to insurance. We'll deal with it just as another sort of business continuity issue. This is different. This is about breaking stuff and also hanging around a little bit to break stuff down the line as well. Just a lot more malicious element to it than maybe some of the other hackers we're used to dealing with. One of the things that you brought up in here, it's just happened this week before we record. Obviously, things are going on in Iran. There's a lot going on over there. I'm just curious, what are you seeing in terms of activity from some of these hacktivist groups or state-sponsored groups from targeting maybe U.S. infrastructure, or what should we expect down the road?
Right now, prepare for just be prepared, be
Yeah.
vigilant. Right now, what we're seeing is, because when the United States and Israel initially struck Iran, there are already cyber effects happening in Iran, prior to the actual bombs landing. They lost access to the internet. They were losing, a lot of their communication systems were being knocked out. Cyber attacks were impacting everywhere. There's footage that I saw last night of like live TV broadcasts where they were suddenly hacked and you had the Prime Minister of Israel speaking on the TV and stuff like that. So it's a wide range of cyber effects that are not only disrupting Iran's communications, but also causing a lot of information, basically pushing propaganda, or what I like to call information operations, right? So that's what's going on right now. In return, Iran has always been a capable threat actor in that information operation space. Because, I mean, you could remember plenty of times, anytime there was a threat, they would post a silly video on Twitter or a video on your favorite social media of like Iranian bombing Washington D.C. or
Right.
destroying ships or things like that. So they're very active in that space. Now, what I'm seeing right now in terms on the cyber side of things, I have been seeing some reporting of Iran pre-positioning malware prior to Operation Epic Fury. They were pre-positioning malware in Israel and other locations, but more for an espionage gain. I just recently read one now where Iran was trying to compromise the Israeli Red Alert app that they use. So in Israel, whenever there's missiles coming, you get a notification and it shows you on a map like where your bomb shelters are, or where to hide, and where they're supposed to be impact. Iran was working or had been working on some malware to compromise that, to have users go in there and through that app get malware, which is interesting because prior to the actual strikes, part of that information operations campaign, part of the cyber effects that we were doing against Iran, Iran has what's called a prayer app that they use, and a lot of the IRGC and a lot of the targets that we've struck use that app in general. And that app, basically, they would all get notifications on, and it's like, gather here. And that made it just easier for the United States and Israel to target multiple individuals at one time with one strike. So that's interesting. It kind of shows the capabilities of like cyber, in cyberspace and cyber warfare. But I'd say right now, that's the things that I'm looking at right now. I'm also, like I said, I'm just checking on my feeds. I see a lot of claims to compromising sites and compromising organizations, but those claims do not seem to be corroborated, unfortunately. Well, fortunately, they're not corroborated. They're just making claims online, which anyone can do, but there's no evidence to prove those claims. But that's not to say to not be vigilant, because all it takes is one.
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting. When everything spiked in Ukraine and the U.S. decided to support Ukraine, a lot of those cyber attackers, a lot of those, if you will call them hacktivist groups or state-sponsored actors, whatever, from Russia, sort of used that as an excuse or a reason to start going against or start, trying to penetrate a lot of the U.S. infrastructure, which obviously impacts manufacturers. Do you see things going on now in Iran? Because that give Iran sort of, again, an excuse or legitimize them to increase the amount of frequency that they then start going after U.S. assets?
I would say, I think the frequency was always there, right? Because of the Israel and Gaza conflict, the intention and the motivations were there. Now, will I say that the motivations have been accelerated? Probably, right? You're going to go from, you're already mad at Israel and Iran, not Israel, Iran, Israel and Gaza. So you were already aggressively targeting the United, you're feeling a certain way about the United States because the United States supports Israel, right? But the United States wasn't in direct conflict. But now that it's in direct conflict, I'm pretty certain that there's gonna be a lot more passion out there to want to stop them. I wouldn't even be surprised if hacktivist groups that may not be aligned with Russia and Iran, but maybe anti-war, you know what I mean, like Anonymous, would jump into it as well. Anonymous back then would constantly target Israel. I mean, even before the Gaza war, there was always that one yearly event called Op Israel, where like all the actors that fall under the umbrella of Anonymous would conduct DDoS attacks against Israel. I could probably see that same thing happening back to us again. Yes.
Interesting. And I say that, and I know I keep kind of bringing this up, but wars are no longer just geographic conflicts. I mean, they spread across all of these different sectors that now are all interconnected so quickly. So even though the bombs aren't dropping here, we're still going to feel some side effects. We're still going to feel some of that attack, if you will, coming from Iran and those who sympathize with their cause. So definitely a lot of diligence there.
Yeah, it's it's an interconnected world. I mean, I would say since we could go back to like 2015 with the NotPetya attack, which knocked out which almost knocked out Maersk. It was intended to just target Ukraine, and the second, third order effects went all across the world. So yeah, that happens. That happens definitely.
Absolutely. Well, JP, we've been talking about the bad guys. We'll talk about the bad guys a little bit more, but let's talk about the good guys. Let's talk about binary defense a little bit. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the company and some of the things you're doing to help support manufacturers as they deal with more of these cyber challenges.
Yeah, I'll make it short and brief. Binary Defense is a managed detection and response company. We provide services that give manufacturers 24-hour threat monitoring, but not just manufacturers. Our clients are across multiple different industry verticals. But we have a platform, the MDR platform, which ingests telemetry across different endpoints, networks, clouds, and identities. And we try to filter. We work to filter out the noise and only flag those like high risk activity that can disrupt production or steal some intellectual property. Now, at the core of binary defense, we have a world-class team of 24/7 security operations center, which is staffed by some really, really bright and smart guys. And they're ready to work, all around the clock. Because for manufacturers, this around the clock coverage means that any after hours intrusions or factory or floor anomaly triggers an immediate response from our company. We do emphasize also some of our services. We also have proactive threat hunting. So if, let's say, the SOC is monitoring, right? But you got that feeling that, man, there's something weird going on in there. I want someone to go in there and look for any artifacts that there might be a bad guy lurking. Because here's the other thing, as I mentioned earlier before, manufacturing has also a lot of research and development, right? And it doesn't have to be a hacktivist that's going to try to disrupt your thing, but it could be an espionage actor that wants to know the secret recipe or wants to know, some new schematics and whatnot. And they're gonna lurk in those systems, right? They're gonna lurk in there. They're gonna quietly take out that proprietary data. So that's what our threat hunters do, right? That's what they specialize. And then they also look at patterns like unusual file process. Like I said, let's say you have like an unusual file process in your R&D design systems, or there might be a misuse of production networks. They'll look for that. They'll catch those insiders or advanced attackers that normal tools might miss. And then for me, I'm the threat intel guy. So we have a service called Threat Intelligence on Demand. And what we do is, we basically provide reports. We provide deep dive briefings. We look into a threat actor. Like if you wanted to know about a threat actor that impacted your organization, we can go and we can collect that information for you, provide you reports, mitigations, as well as best practices as well. And then give you like full details on the threat actor. And we're just and for me and my team, we're just constantly monitoring since like Iran is our big thing right now. That's all I've been reporting on and pumping out information. And then like I mentioned earlier, the digital risk protection service, those are to monitor like open sources, dark web for any leaked credentials, any exposed intellectual property, or signs that a manufacturer has been targeted. And they also monitor like your CEO or the family of a CEO, or if or your company. If your company is being, if your company is being targeted by a hacktivist group or whatnot, you will be alerted and whatnot. And then we also have some really strong partnerships in the cybersecurity industry. We have technology alliances with providers like Microsoft, Palo Alto, which enables us to manage and monitor tools like with Microsoft Sentinel and Cortex XSAIM. I'm sorry, I always want to say SIM, but it's XSAIM. And that's something that many manufacturers already use. So that's kind of a quick.
Absolutely.
I said it was quick, but it was a little long-winded explanation about the company.
No, good stuff, man. The one thing that I keep thinking about too is there's so much to defend when you look at manufacturing and really any place, but we're obviously in the industrial sector here. When these hacktivists or state-sponsored groups go after somebody, do they have a preferred way of trying to get in? Are they looking at endpoints? Are they looking at connection points, credentials? Are they just basically finding the weak spot and going, or do they have a preferred, I guess, avenue of approach?
To be honest, with most manufacturing threats, it's usually usually the lowest hanging fruit. If you have an open VNC connection that you can find on Shodan or Census, they're gonna jump into it, right? If there's an open HMI connection, they're gonna jump into it. And that's the thing. A lot of the stuff that I see online of like threat actors such as Handala Hack or No Name, or even like Killnet or Zacnet, that will post something online of a manufacturing or industrial control system that they quote unquote compromise. That's usually, I would say, 9 times out of 10, that was because that was unmonitored. That was something that someone installed, never left default password, left default creds in there, and it was compromised, and it was a gateway in. When it comes to the more advanced stuff, when we're talking about, espionage, that's usually more or less either it's a combination of things, right? If I'll be very honest, it could be a combination of things. It could be a vulnerability that they identified on an endpoint or on a network device and compromised it and got in that way. It could be your very typical social engineering attack via spear phishing email, like, hey, here's the latest schematics on something, but those schematics have a piece of malware in there that drops into your system. And then those right there, those two examples are probably ones that I would say you would see the most targeting manufacturing. And then, like I said, the hacktivists it's more of the something's dangling out there and they just take advantage of it. Another one I can think of that targets manufacturing those are probably the two main ones that if I could remember just from past reporting and past analysis, would be so for espionage, I would expect the let's look for a vulnerability, let's exploit it, let's get in that way, or let's send you a spear phishing email, let's get you that way, or in the inverse, I send you an email or I say, hey, I need access to this, I steal your creds. That's another one. And then, of course, the hacktivists are going to be the low hanging fruit. Not to say that an APT actor wouldn't do the same thing as well.
Sure.
I mean, heck, if it's easy for them to get in, why not?
Yeah.
But those are probably the ones. Those are the ones I would say are the most common for how manufacturers are targeted.
No, makes sense. One of the things that I always ask about too is I think over the past, let's say since Colonial Pipeline, I think the industrial sector overall has gotten a lot better at detecting threats and trying to mitigate them. I think there's been so much movement and so much improvement there. But this part where we still struggle is the response plan. How do we respond once we figure out what's going on or we've gotten that ransomware note, whatever the case is? What advice or perspective might you be able to offer in terms of developing and then executing those response plans?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say tabletop exercises is the way to do
Yeah.
it. Just because you have a response plan and you have it sitting on your desk, this nice binder that like tells you step by step what to do when something happens. Put that binder to work,
Yeah.
quarterly, yearly, run a tabletop exercise, of different scenarios too. It doesn't have to be something cyber. It could be something like an insider threat that leaked information to another outside entity that might be a hacker. I would say that's the best practice, best advice to give is constantly run exercises under different scenarios and different formats because especially for your BCP and whatnot. If you don't do those kind of things on a regular, when it actually happens, you might be stuck. You're gonna be lost trying to figure things out. You're gonna go through the steps, but you're just not gonna do it right, in my opinion. It's practice, practice,
Yeah.
practice, in my opinion.
It is crazy how often that response comes up about just those very simple tabletop exercises. What I always talk about is sort of the blocking and tackling. We had a guest on previously who described it as like a Dungeons and Dragons crusade or campaign. Anything you need to do to get folks involved, and kind of going back to one of the things you mentioned before too about some of the silos that we operate in, make sure it's not just the IT folks, bring in those operations folks, bring in some of those supply chain folks and get everybody involved in talking and working together on these things. That has such a big part, it seems like, in executing successful response plans.
Yeah, absolutely. And also with these tabletop exercises, get senior
Yeah.
leaders involved.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, don't get the CEO, you know what I mean? But maybe like the CIO, maybe the
Yeah.
CTO, someone at that ELT level so they can talk to the boss and let them know, hey, we ran this exercise, we didn't do good, we did good, just to help out because honestly, because you're right, siloing is a big in any organization. Siloing has always been a thing, and collaboration between and not just IT and OT, right? But collaboration between IT, OT, vulnerability management, the physical security guys, the freaking risk management people, and maybe even just the guys on the floor. Getting all those folks together actually is much more. It's a better way to really play out that entire exercise from start to finish, and everybody learns their part in the exercise. Because that's the other thing too. Everyone has a distinct role in the exercise, and as long as it's all that synergies there, that the results can be a lot better. The impact would probably be a lot less as well. You're still going to get impacted because
Yeah. Yeah.
playing the exercise, you're still going to get impacted, but at least you know what you're doing at that time.
Absolutely. No, could not agree more. Very well said. JP, this has been awesome. We've covered a lot of different stuff, a lot of great insight here. Wrapping things up a little bit, when you look forward and you look at this landscape, what are some of the biggest trends, themes, concerns you may have as we look forward with industrial cybersecurity?
Oh, okay. The $1 million question always. As us in threat intelligence, we don't like to give predictions. We don't like to look like we don't have a crystal ball to look into the
Yeah,
future.
no, that's
So
fair.
I'm gonna do my best to like from what I'm seeing right now and just my personal thoughts and opinions on this one. I think right now it's artificial intelligence. It's AI. AI right now I'm reading that 94% of manufacturing companies are reporting to use some kind of generative AI tool in some form. Now, I don't know if it's Grok or Agentic, or if it's not Agentic, Anthropic, or Claude is Anthropic, or Gemini or OpenAI. But everyone's using AI in some way or form, and the adversaries are leveraging these same technologies. So they're leveraging AI pretty much to become like what I call AI for bad guys as a force multiplier. Bad guys are leveraging AI right now to discover vulnerabilities on software and on hardware. They're also leveraging AI to create malware as well, very distinct malware tools. They're leveraging AI to create those deep fake voices. So one of the things that's really popular with some of these threat actors when you're using AI, if it's not if it's not for cyber attacks, it's for social engineering. So they'll leverage AI to mimic the voice of, let's say, someone that you know that works in finance and needs you to wire him a certain amount of money, and you're in the office, you're like, oh yeah, that's Bill from finance. Let me wire him that money. Oh wow, that email looks a little different, but no matter, it's Bill, right? And you wire it over, and that's not Bill you wired over. You wired it over to, someone else, another threat actor. I've been seeing a lot of that lately with AI. But going back to like when it comes to IT and OT, right now I see a lot of threat actors that are basically, using machine language, machine learning, and AI to generate really, really, I would say, some very scary tools to target manufacturing and to target industries. And the thing is, now we in cyber defense, we are also leveraging AI to basically help build our own tools as quickly as possible to defend against it. But one generative AI malware that I saw, really, really, I would say sneaky. It was one particular malware, and I don't remember the name off the top of my head right now. But what it would do is, if it was caught by an EDR, it would just change itself up again. So like if you shot it, the EDR sees it, and it would obfuscate its own code for a second attempt, which is kind
Jeez.
of,
Wow.
I'm like, all right, that's impressive. That's impressive. You know.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I'm concerned about AI also in terms of like cyber risk is the usage of AI agents and co-pilots. I this is again a personal opinion. I don't like a boot kit that's an AI in my computer, because if that AI gets compromised, it can start deleting my stuff, or I can make my machine a bot for other AI bots to conduct attacks and whatnot. So that's my concern. And my also concern is with companies that are adopting like their own home built AI. If there's no guardrails in their home built AIs against an intruder going into the back door of that AI and manipulating it and making it do what it wants, that's another risk as well.
No, great points. I'm a fan of AI, but I think we need to pump the brakes a little bit and be smart in the way we apply it. The agents make me cause some concern because, to borrow, some James Bond type speak, those agents can be turned too, with some of the bad guys. We could have some double agents working within our systems that can just wreak havoc, as you alluded to. JP, last question I got for you. I always like when we're talking to those who are really involved in threat analysis and they learn a lot about the bad guys. How do you sleep at night? Like, what are some of the things that give you some peace of mind or some solace so you're not constantly worried about all the bad stuff that can happen?
I've been doing threat intelligence for over 20 years now. I mean, I how do how do I sleep at night, to be honest? Yeah, that's a tough one. A beer,
Yeah,
a
fair.
tall glass of beer for Chaser to
Yeah.
go to sleep. It's, you know what, you just have to have your head. I mean, it's you're in. I mean, you're just in it all the time. I just learned that this world is a crazy place. There's threats out there everywhere. The best I can do is, one of the things I say is, I scare because I care. From Toy Story, we scare because we care. That's my role. I scare because I care. So that's where I have my peace of mind. If I'm able to tell people, hey, be on the lookout for this. Hey, be cognizant of that. Hey, I saw this. You might wanna double check, change your passwords or something like that. I get asked all the time by folks, family and friends, hey, what are you concerned about? with this threat or that threat. I just got a message now from a family member. It's like, hey, should I be worried about China and Russia getting involved in Iran? And it's like that's a really good question. And I just told her no, not really, because it wouldn't benefit both countries right now to get involved in that kind of conflict. So yeah, how I sleep better at night, it's pretty much more me sharing that information, my passion and my love for what I do. And even now having this conversation, I love it. This is what helps me go to sleep at night, because I'm providing my knowledge or my advice on how to better protect, your organization, better protect your friends, your family, your business and whatnot. So yeah. But I still need that beer at the end of the night.
Fair enough. Well, hey, you're setting a great example, not for the beer drinking, but I mean, I like that example, but also just sharing that information, because I think you're 100% right. That's what we all need to do when we do experience these intrusions, when we have these vulnerabilities. Let's be a little bit more transparent and share this information so we can help everybody be better. I mean, it sounds utopic in some ways, but it really is, in my opinion, what we have to do. So
yeah, it does sound utopic. It very does sound utopic. Because the other thing in our industry as well is that intelligence, you have to curate it, you have to analyze, you have to make sure that intelligence information is accurate, relevant, and actionable. You don't want to be the boy who cried wolf out there as well.
fair.
So in that part of the world, there's a lot of there's analytical rigor. There's things that when I see something, I have to double, triple check it to make sure that those claims are valid or true. Just like what I said earlier today with the Iranian hackers making all these claims online that, oh, we got this, we got that. It's like, let me double check that,
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. JP, this has been awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the time, man.
No, I appreciate the time, Jeff, and I hope to talk to you again sometime in the near future.
Thanks, JP. And for more information on the work he and his colleagues are doing, you can check them out at binarydefense.com. I'd also like to thank you for joining us today, and to catch up on past episodes, you can go to manufacturing.net, IEN.com, or mbtmag.com. You can also check out Security Breach wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple, Amazon, and Overcast. And if you have a cybersecurity story or topic that you'd like to have us explore on Security Breach, you can reach me at jeff@IEN.com. For JP Castellanos, I'm Jeff Ranke, and this is Security Breach.